Hello and welcome to a Firstpost POV. In global politics, it's all about changing equations. If you want proof of that, look no further than what's happening in Russia. As we speak, Moscow is hosting the interim president of Syria, Ahmed al-Sharaa, the man who was formerly a sanctioned terrorist. And why is this strange? Because the same Russia used to back the other side in the Syrian civil war. They backed the regime of Bashar al-Assad, who's now living in exile in Syria. That topic is expected to come up in the talks that will be happening in Moscow. And Russian President Putin is hoping to restore the ties that he once had with the Syrian capital. Let's see if he is able to achieve that in these talks. And if so, what sort of foothold can he hope to achieve in the region? Let me put some of these questions to my guest, Dr Anna Matveeva, who's a senior visiting research fellow at the King's College in London. Thank you so much, Dr Matveeva, for speaking to us.
Thank you for your invitation.
Let's talk about the major sticking point that's expected in Moscow. Reports say that Ahmed al-Sharaa will raise the topic of returning former President Bashar al-Assad to Syria. Is that something that the Russian president will even entertain in the talks?
I don't think so. I think that al-Sharaa is under pressure from his domestic forces, especially to press Moscow on a release and handing over of the former President Bashar al-Assad. But I think that President al-Sharaa also understands that this is an impossible demand. That on one hand, he has to put it to Putin, but on the other hand, he knows that Putin is going to reject it. So if that was the only item he wanted to talk about, he would not go to Moscow. Certainly, there is a whole other agenda at stake. Russia has two bases there. Russia has security interests. The new Syrian authorities do need friends in security field. For example, already now Russia returned to patrolling the M4 highway on the border close to the border with Turkey. That's the highway which Russians used to patrol under the previous regime. Then this was suspended. Now they are back into that business. Russia also has economic interests. Syrian side is trying to attract investment, doesn't want to break out economic ties, but also Syrian army for years and decades have been procuring Soviet and then Russian-made weapons. Many people were trained by the Russians in military academies. So it's a very deep sort of web of relationships, networks, capabilities, personal ties. That is everything which Russia would try to capitalize on. And so far, they have been doing it fairly successfully, more successfully than it appeared just when the new government came to power. As far as Bashar al-Assad is concerned, he was given a very clear signal by the Kremlin that you can have an asylum with us, you and your family are safe, but the price for it that you live as a private citizen. You do not stand in the way of Moscow building a new relationship with the power holders in Damascus. As long as Assad is not going to violate his side of the bargain, Moscow is going to stick to theirs. The lesson which Russia has learned from the end of the Cold War, that you do not give up your allies as long as they are loyal to you. Moscow has given up allies before. That was really detrimental, and that's something which they are determined to show that it's an issue of honor for them.
Right.
It's not about Assad personally, but if Russia promises their guarantees for your safety, they mean something, that they would not be violated because of a political expediency. So from that point of view, that's probably a dead horse.
Right. So you're saying that Mr. al-Sharaa may likely raise the issue of Bashar al-Assad, but it's unlikely that the Russians will ever budge on it since they've promised him asylum as long as he lives as a private citizen. The other topic, of course, is that of the Russian base in Tartus, which used to be the major Russian point to project power in the region. Now, Ahmed al-Sharaa has said that he will honor all past agreements that were signed between Syria and Russia. Should we take that to mean that he is okay with the Russian military presence and Russia having a base in Syria?
I think that we can interpret it that way exactly. I think, well, first there are two bases. One is the naval base, and this is the only Russian naval facility on the Mediterranean Sea. It goes back to the Soviet times. It is important not for Syria per se, but it is important for operations in Mediterranean, Russia still being a global player in that theater. It is also important for Russia's ties and operations in Africa, especially in West Africa. So, and the Gulf, again, that is makes Russia still a staying power, an enduring power in Mediterranean security. Then there is an air base, which is perhaps less significant. It has more relevance for Syria per se. For example, it played a role when there were massacres in Tartus. So some civilian population fled to that base, and hundreds of lives have been saved in that way. So it also offered some kind of service to the new authorities in a way that it offered a sanctuary in the midst of that violence. What probably is going to change is that, well, under the previous regime, the bases have been offered to Russia basically for free. Now it's much more likely that Russia would actually have to pay for the bases. And Russia is prepared to pay. They do have the money. It is not a big sacrifice for them. And they would also think that, okay, it is fair. The new Syrian government does need ready cash. It's not that very easy for them to raise it. So yes, if they want us to pay, that's probably quite okay with us.
You talk about the Russians probably paying to retain the military base they have in Syria. Do you see that as being a cash transaction because of the sanctions, or would you think the Syrians would be more open to perhaps weapons or maybe some sort of technology to extract resources that Syria has? In which way do you see that transaction going?
I think that there will be a combination, as usual, because, for example, Syria desperately needs energy resources. And Russia does have energy, and it used to supply Syria quite massively before that. So that's one thing. Cash, obviously, is something which can also change hands. Now we have cryptocurrencies, we have different ways, Bitcoin. So it's far less kind of easy. It's much easier to kind of use multiple channels for different fairly small sum transactions. But weapons, again, because Israeli army has Israeli defense forces depleted the Syrian artillery, aviation systems, a lot of ground level equipment. So the Syrians are looking at getting some weapons, especially weapons that they know how to use, which are already embedded in their systems. So we'll see some kind of combination of what is currently expedient. The important thing is that we are looking at something which can be delivered fast, because the West is also offering various things to Syria. But for example, Europe, European Union, nothing moves fast. So even if things are promised, that doesn't mean that they will actually come right now. And Russia has that capacity to deliver, and Syrian side knows it.
Right. We'll talk about the Western help that Syria wants a bit later. But first, let's talk about why these relations seem to be so warm. I mean, I'm thinking from al-Sharaa's perspective, and the Russians fought against him for more than a decade. They launched airstrikes on his fellow militants and insurgents, terrorists at one point, and now he seems to be going to Moscow. He's having these warm talks with Putin. Why is it that he's so okay with engaging with Moscow? Is it a method to play off the West against each other? Is it a method to perhaps want more options, considering he's just coming out of sanctions and international isolation?
I think he is really proved himself to be much more pragmatic than an ideological and fanatical warrior. And that's why he probably is going to be quite successful in Syria in the end. So far, he avoided the trap of being dragged into geopolitical competition, which has nothing to do with Syria. So he put Syrian interests first, not great power interests, not the kind of wider Middle East politics. He thinks what is best for Syria right now. And Syria needs friends. Syria already has a lot of players who are playing against it. Internally and in the region, look at Israel. So they need, they cannot sacrifice alliances. They want to build ties. For example, Syria has a big problem with Israel. So they need allies who can be interlocutors with the Israeli side, who can sort of call it to some kind of reasonable negotiating settlement. So Russians come handy in that equation. So in that sense, there is nothing to be gained out of confrontation with Russia, while things can be gained by maintaining reasonably good relationship with them, given that Russians also understand that they are not going to play the first fiddle. The first fiddle is being now played by Turkey. They are prepared to give space to others in Syria, like Turkey, the Gulf states, Arab countries in general, United States, potentially. So in that sense, they do have mutual understanding based on the national interests of what they want from each other rather than wider ideology or geopolitics.
Right. Now, we know that Syria needs all the help it can get, but the problem with the West, as we've seen, is that they tend to look at things in a black or white manner. You're either with us or against us. So do you fear that this outreach to the Russians and these perhaps deals that the Syrian regime could sign with Moscow will endanger Syria's relations with the West? Maybe the West will look at it and say, you're doing business with Russia, we are not going to help you anymore. Do you fear that sort of outreach being endangered?
Not massively, because remember, Syria has been under Western sanctions for decades. Under Hafez al-Assad and later his son. So in that sense, some kind of degree of ostracism from the West is something which Syria has lived through from at least 1970s. So there are no kind of really big issues at stake because there are no major European companies investing in Syria or even promising to come with major investment. So yes, there are some businesses, there is some development aid, but nothing which is coming out is pretty, we're thinking about really kind of fairly modest things. What is the, great uncertainty is the future of the US troops in Syria. That can be a game changer, but that's really up to Trump. And Trump is not starting with this kind of note that you should get Russians out and then we will consider withdrawing troops. That's not his approach. His approach is we want to withdraw because we really don't have a dog in that fight, but we have to make sure that Israeli security interests are guaranteed. As soon as we see that that's actually happening, then troops withdrawal would be probably going ahead. So Europe would be really alone in that game. And frankly speaking, I don't think that Syria for them is so important. Remember, there are large numbers of Syrian refugees in Europe. European countries would like some of them, or all of them, or most of them, to go back to Syria. So they need the new Syrian authorities to cooperate in that. Otherwise, they will host these refugees indefinitely. So they do have things which they want from Syria to play along with. And refugees is a major card which he has. And most Syrian refugees are in Europe.
Right. You mentioned the US soldiers in Syria, and there's no timeline for them to withdraw. Like you said, it's all about when Israel feels that its security interests have been guaranteed. You've also got Israel saying they need a sort of demilitarized or buffer zone to protect their interests. You've got the Turks on the north saying they need their own buffer zone as well. Then you've got the Russian base, the Americans. Do you fear that this outreach to everyone and sort of giving space to everyone is violating Syria's sovereignty and making the country a sort of playground for all these foreign powers?
Yes, this is something which is to some extent happening, but there is also, how can I say, al-Sharaa is not in a very strong position to take all the issues simultaneously. His first and foremost challenge is to improve internal safety and security, so that they do not have that kind of massacres like we have seen in al-Assad, we've seen in Tartus. So they also have a problem with the Islamic State. They are still there. They do raise their head. So he needs to concentrate on that. If Russians can help with that, fine. If Americans can help, and they are saying that we are willing to help with combating ISIS, if Turkey is willing to help with some other security issues, you take it. You take any help which comes your way. The US had withdrawal plan from Syria, from northeastern Syria, but they were also going to withdraw from Iraq. But then events in the Middle East turned far more violent, so that timetable has been delayed. Iraq is also important because the American troops would be withdrawing first and foremost into Iraq. And presence of the US troops is a controversial issue within Iraqi politics. So we'll see. I think that it's probably going to happen at some point. But before that, internal situation in Syria would need to get a bit more stabilized rather than what it's now. And also their police, their armed forces will have to be in a kind of more coherent order. I think we're probably getting there, but it will take time.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head there with the internal situation, because al-Sharaa seems to be playing his cards right on the global stage. He's going to the UN, he's visiting European leaders, he's visiting Trump, he's visiting Putin. But the question is, can he stabilize the situation inside his country, bring all the warring groups together to the table, hold good elections, not like the ones that we saw recently, and put Syria back on the path to stability? We'll be watching what happens in Russia closely. Thank you so much, Dr. Matveeva, for speaking to us on Firstpost.
Thank you.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.